Have a look inside yourself. Meditation is more than either stress relief or enlightenment. Hello, enlightenment enthusiast. Welcome back to Have a Look Inside. Stay tuned until the end. We have expert advice on meditation at the end of this video. Hit the road with us. Flash your thumb with a like and subscribe to ride along on our next adventure. Meditation has taken two divergent paths through the Western mind. For many, it's a few quick, calming breaths, perhaps timed with a smartphone app in search of a stress tonic that can soften anxiety's edges. But this bifurcated view of meditation as a relaxing practice for the masses and a life-changing practice for the committed few is deeply misleading. A spectrum runs between them, harboring experiences that are far more interesting and powerful than what the growing mindfulness industry advertises, and more accessible to average people than what tropes of arcane states like enlightenment suggest. Given that wealthy countries like the US aren't exactly riding trend lines toward new peaks of mental health, depression rates in American adults are at an all-time high, while young people appear in the grips of a mental health crisis. Scalable ways of not just mindfully soothing, but completely recreating psychological experiences for the better should set off sirens of general, scientific, and funding intrigue. For the past 2 decades, the growing science of meditation has roughly followed the same split that ignores this middle path. Most research studies basic mindfulness as a health intervention in novice meditators, where modestly positive results have led to comparisons like exercise for the mind or mental flossing. A new band of researchers, however, is finding that you don't need 10,000 hours in a monastery before meditation can upend your entire psychology. And yet, the current body of meditation research has had surprisingly little to say about this middle ground between stress relief and enlightenment. As the number of meditating Americans has more than tripled in recent years, an onslaught of apps, books, and seminars helped mold the public image of meditation around the simpler and more sellable idea of mindfulness as a form of stress reduction. That image is paying off. The broader mindfulness industry was valued at $97.6 million in 2021 and is projected to triple in value by 2031. Sachet is part of a recent turn in meditation research that is putting the fuller, stranger range of meditative experiences under the scrutiny of laboratory conditions. There was this initial focus on meditation as attention and emotional regulation practices, said Ruben Laukkanen, an assistant professor at Southern Cross University. Research labs and private companies are already developing technologies they hope can democratize access to meditation's deep-end experiences. Scaling access to the benefits of advanced meditation could offer something a little stronger, or a lot stronger depending on how the tech fares, to the more than 100 million users who turn to mindfulness apps like Calm or Headspace in search of a psychological balm. But concerns abound. Even if profoundly altered states of consciousness are amenable to hacking, an unsettled debate. There's hardly any evidence that today's generation of tools is up to the task. On one hand, the Western study of consciousness has been hamstrung since Galileo cleaved sensory experience from the scientific method, and I can think of few things more worthy of deep research. As far as defiling ancient practices with shiny new technologies or the perils of swapping gurus for algorithms, these are the fascinating, messy, indeed dangerous, and perhaps extraordinarily wonderful examples of how the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, is adapting to a new environment. How mindfulness defined the first wave of contemplative studies. What we now call contemplative science is the interdisciplinary study of how practices like meditation, prayer, and psychedelic use affect the mind, brain, and body. Back then, there were no mindfulness apps or corporate Zen booths offering meditation as a reprieve to stressed-out workers. The idea of meditation as a means of awakening flared up and then began fading out along with the counterculture itself. The son of a biomedical scientist and a painter, Kabat-Zinn earned a PhD in molecular biology in 1971. Shortly after, in 1979, he founded the Stress Reduction Clinic at the medical school, which eventually became the 8-week course known as Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, MBSR, and served as the format for the mindfulness boom to come. Kabat-Zinn authored a few studies on MBSR in the 1980s, but it wasn't until the early 2000s that mindfulness research really took off. Shortly after, scientists picked up on the already existing construct of MBSR, publications on mindfulness began erupting, and the field of contemplative science sprang to life. For 20 years, there were a lot of single-arm trials without controls like placebo groups or randomization, showing MBSR in its various forms can actually help improve health outcomes, said David Vago, a founding neuroscientist at the International Society for Contemplative Research. Now, as the research matures into controlled studies and meta-analyses, meditation is losing a bit of its luster. A 2021 systematic review of 44 meta-analyses found that mindfulness was mostly on par with cognitive behavioral therapy or antidepressants in terms of treatment effects. Mindfulness was superior in a few categories, however, including treating depression and substance abuse. That's still good news, but it's hard to see how something that works about as well as Prozac or a therapist offers the seeds of a necessary global renaissance in the making, as Kabat-Zinn has written, let alone the end of suffering, as the Buddha taught. So we're left with this big question, Vago said. Is the goal of meditation to reduce our perceived stress or symptoms of anxiety? Are those the true goals of the practice? I would say not, but that's how the medical model has been used to test the efficacy of meditation. Everyone I spoke to agreed that there's more to meditation than just another somewhat effective health intervention. But discovering what more exactly will require a different set of questions and tools than what delivered the current generation of mindfulness research. And the past few years have seen a proliferation of precisely that. The next generation of contemplative science is here. Just as the mindfulness era began with the establishment of a university center, a contemplative science focused on psychological transformation is growing its own institutions. Sachet is expanding the meditation research program into a larger operation, the Center for the Science of Meditation, that aims to conduct gold standard research on the deep end of meditation experiences. Lakonen, who focuses on the cognitive neuroscience of meditation, said that we have new theoretical frameworks that can capture contemplative effects. That's a huge shift, because it's really hard to appreciate states that don't fit into your theoretical paradigm. Adding to the new theories are new scientific tools and gizmos. He described how ongoing research is using machine learning models to decode and measure meditative depth, or the expertise of one's practice, opening a new frontier of understanding. In a 2021 paper, Lakonen and his colleague Helene Slachter suggested that one way to think about the depth of meditation is the degree to which the mind is engaged in abstractions or conceptual thought. On that basis, by training machine learning models on brain activity across a variety of tasks that involve conceptual thinking, Lakonen hypothesizes that we could teach the algorithms to recognize the neural signatures of conceptual thought in general. Then we could use those models to measure the degree of conceptual thought present in any brain state, such as during meditation. Alongside new theories and technologies, ancient claims of unbelievable meditative states are being observed under the scrutiny of scientists in controlled settings for the first time. A few thousand years ago, the Mahavajjala Sutta, a scripture of Theravada Buddhism, described one such state that advanced meditators could enter at will, Nirodha Samapatti, or cessation attainment. Think of cessation also scripturally described as the non-occurrence of consciousness, like voluntarily inducing the effects of general anesthesia. The scripture says meditators can predetermine a length of time to go under merely by setting an intended duration, like an internally fashioned alarm clock. That duration is said to be able to stretch up to 7 days, provided their body can last that long. After setting the intention, they settle into meditation and the light of consciousness switches off. Lakonen, Sachet, and their colleagues met someone who claimed they could enter cessation on command and was willing to do so in a lab. In a recent but separate pilot study conducted by Sachet, he found that right before an advanced meditator has micro-cessations, referred to in the ancient texts as Nirodha without the Samapatti, the alpha band of brain activity, the major rhythm of brain activity in typical waking adults, begins winding down. It's at its lowest immediately following the Nirodha, which only lasts maybe a second or two. The preliminary data on the full Nirodha Samapatti found the same pattern. Leading up to cessation, alpha activity began dropping, bottomed out during cessation, and rose again afterward. Being able to train one's mind to manually switch off consciousness for some predetermined period does not weave seamlessly into conventional understandings of human psychology. Maybe like bears, there is some evolutionary value in short periods of mental hibernation. If the ordinary egoic sense of consciousness evolved for environments where a constant hum of fight or flight mentality helped keep us alive, advanced meditation may offer a way of reprogramming some of these inherited tendencies that no longer serve us in our comparatively new evolutionary environments, like discarding clothes that no longer fit. Advanced meditation for everyone. My hope is that ultimately this work will contribute to bringing advanced meditation out of the monastery, Sachet said, describing its incredible promise for moving beyond addressing mental health issues toward helping people thrive. To do that, meditation probably needs to reach more than a sliver of humanity, which could be a problem. Many people do not like to meditate. One infamous study found that many participants would rather administer electric shocks to themselves than sit quietly doing nothing for 15 minutes. And 15 minutes is on the low end of meditation periods, even for basic mindfulness. But if American culture is obsessed with anything, it's optimization. Can we get the same or more outputs from fewer inputs? Can we automate any part of the process? One label for this optimization effort is spirit tech, a mixed bag consisting mainly of brain stimulation, neurofeedback, and psychedelics. This isn't new precisely. Mantras, monasteries, and robes are forms of spirit tech that have been used for generations. One of the spirit tech frontiers is transcranial ultrasound stimulation, a method Jay Sanguinetti, an assistant professor, and Shinzen Young, a celebrated meditation teacher, are working on as co-directors of the SEMA Lab, Science-Enhanced Mindful Awareness, at the University of Arizona. In prior research, they showed that targeted bursts of ultrasound can alter brain connectivity. Standing at the precipice of democratizing access to sudden bursts of deep meditation experiences is exciting. The less glamorous risks that might come with a shortcut to the depths of contemplative practice, not as much. While very rare, these can range from anxiety spikes to psychotic breaks. Young told a meditation student about falling into the pit of the void, one of the ways Buddhist tradition describes how intense experiences can go wrong. Even now, Daniel Ingram, a former emergency room physician and author of Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, cautioned, "There's basically a long, slow train wreck happening between people getting into these experiences and the clinical mainstream just not understanding them." Notably, in a promotional video for the research, Young narrates, "If you'll pardon my French, we are scared shitless of this technology. And yet, as in the world of AI, they're building it anyway." Vago told me that support systems help to navigate these experiences. Once you zap or sonicate someone into a brain state associated with deep-end meditation, enlightenment doesn't simply lock into place. There are also questions of efficacy. Even if you can quickly techno-boost someone into a sudden burst of enlightenment-like states, are they really experiencing the same thing as someone who patiently meditated for years to get there? If you get people into these states, then you give them the impression that that is the goal state. Then they come into their meditation practice with a complete misunderstanding of what the purpose is according to any of the classical instructions, and they spend their meditation trying to get into a state, which prevents all of the interesting and useful transformations from happening. In his view, held by many others I spoke with, contemplative traditions do not describe meditation as a practice for getting into funky states of mind. These are side effects. Contemplative traditions have embraced paradox as a central element of their teachings. Optimizing around a paradox, however, is tricky business. You might wind up reinforcing the very construct of the self that meditation aims to deconstruct. Contemplative science needs scalable bureaucracy. Whether the widening field of contemplative science will drum up an American desire for freedom and liberation, who knows? What people want, said Ingram, is a long, happy, good life most of the time. The problem is that we don't actually know what leads to that. As contemplative scientists are now diving in, Ingram hopes that public health officials will follow, alongside deeper scientific knowledge that could help scale interest in advanced meditation. Supporting those already having these experiences requires better clinical support. More broadly, Ingram emphasized that spreading the knowledge contemplative scientists may glean from studying advanced meditation will require better packaging. It's possible that what matters most in the murky terrain of advanced meditation will forever elude scientific measurement, mass uptake, and bureaucratic integration, at least to some degree. As the best spiritual teachers all emphasize, rather than taking anyone's word for it, we should find out for ourselves. A guide to meditation for people who think they can't meditate. If you've ever, in an anxiety-induced haze, Googled ways to reduce your stress, it's quite possible the internet has suggested you meditate. A regularly discussed antidote to our demanding times, meditation is a mental and physical exercise meant to help cultivate qualities like mindfulness, inner peace, or spiritual enlightenment. A common meditation misconception, according to Marvin G. Belzer, an associate professor of psychiatry at UCLA, is that you must totally clear your mind to reap the benefits of the practice. The mind at times will be racing, says Belzer, who is also the associate director of the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. If we try to fight the thoughts to make them stop, that's a losing battle. Instead of squashing a wandering mind, Belzer says to focus thoughts elsewhere, on the breath, the body, ambient sounds. Before you start, determine when, where, why, and for how long you'll be meditating. The best meditation practice is a consistent one, Moore says. It's better to meditate in smaller increments more consistently, he says, than to inconsistently meditate for a really long time. You don't need much to meditate, but apps can help. Beginners will find meditation much more accessible when they're being guided either by a teacher or by a recording. If someone just sits down to meditate, it can seem like how in the world could this possibly help? What to do when you're meditating? Begin the meditation session and follow the instructions. If you feel your mind wandering, to your to-do list, to a twinge in your side, to birds chirping, simply acknowledge whatever has caught your attention and then focus again on your breath, Belzer says. This is what helps build mindfulness, simply addressing what's happening without judging it or trying to change it. Remember, the goal isn't to turn off your brain, but to let go of thoughts as they arise. It's about not getting caught up in the content of thoughts, Mauricio says. We're not trying to stop thinking, but just don't get caught in them. Don't worry if your thoughts diverge multiple times or you don't feel calm. Just like with any hobby or activity, there will be some days that feel better than others, Moore says. If you sit and you get frustrated, cool, that was Monday's practice, he says. What does it feel like Tuesday? What does it feel like Wednesday? What to do if you get frustrated and want to quit? Belzer frequently encounters people who tried meditation in the past but gave it up because they couldn't clear their mind and believed they were not meditating correctly. You've had a false belief about meditation, that you were failing and that you couldn't do it, he says, because you were trying to do something impossible and something that we don't really need to do. Mauricio recommends trying a specific meditation practice for 10 to 14 days. If you still don't feel calm or centered, try changing the time of day, location, or duration of your meditation. While meditation can minimize depression and anxiety, it's not a panacea for all that ails you. You may still feel anxious or agitated after a session and perhaps need to pair meditation with therapy, Moore says. Give yourself credit for showing up and focusing on your breathing for a few minutes. Any new hobby can be difficult at times, especially one that requires mental focus. Be kind to yourself throughout the process. We might hold ourselves to a high standard in our practice, because that is what helps us succeed in our daily life, Mauricio says. In our practice, the mind will wander. That is not a problem. Well, that's all, folks. Stay safe until the next video. In the meantime, and as always, leave a comment or two and letting us know what you think. Thank you for watching Have a Look Inside. Until next time, happy living. Visit MeggDigital.com.